Hello everybody, welcome to this video. So today's video is a super exciting one. I'll be going through my experience of running a game studio at uni. It's been an amazing experience and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So pretty much I'm going to be going over what the game is about and how it got chosen to be made. I'm also going to be going over my role within the studio and how I organised a team of 27 to make the game. I'm also going to be going through all the issues that we faced while working as a team and all the issues you face while working in a game studio. Okay, so let's get started. So pretty much at the start of the module, each person in the class had to pitch a game. I pitched a VR horror game, which was quite ambitious thinking about it now because no one had developed VR before. But clearly everyone was up for the challenge because my game ended up getting chosen. The name of the game is Shush. It's a VR horror game based on a young man who was woken up in his childhood bedroom. The aim of the game is to complete 4 mini games that are based around the house, and whilst you're in the corridors you have to make as little noise as possible so you don't alert the monster. There are also candles that you have to light up to make sure the corridors don't go dark, because if all the candles go out you then lose the game. After completing each minigame, you can then collect a key, which is used to open the front door. There are 4 locks on the front door. In order to find these minigames, there is 4 phones, 1 phone in each room. They all go off at separate times, going from the first minigame then to the second minigame. Once you answer these phones, it then explains the minigame. You play the minigame, collect the key, head to the front door. You can only be attacked in the corridors. Once you're in the minigame room, you are then safe. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully I explained the initial pitch well there. This game will change a lot over the course of this video. It just shows how much a game can change whilst in a game studio. Getting other people's insights onto the game, finding bugs in the initial pitch that just won't work with VR, etc. Yeah, we found a lot of things that just wouldn't work out, and yeah, we'll be going over them in this video. But pretty much my role in this game studio is to organize it and plan it out over a series of weeks. We got taught loads of different techniques to organize a project from industry professionals in the first couple of weeks of the module starting. We got taught the importance of good project management and how important it is to make a high quality game. We also got shown good timelines on a good overview on how we should plan out a project from pre-production to the final release, and how if you've got 10 weeks to make a game, you should really be trying to aim to make it in 7 weeks. We also got shown a really cool image on how to balance the cost, time and the scope of a game, and how they all come together to make a good high quality game. So moving on to the actual project management techniques we got taught. First of all, we had waterfall diagram. Pretty much with waterfall, you start off by listing out all the tasks that you've got to do, and then you put them all in a structured order, working towards a set deadline. Using a Gantt chart for the waterfall diagram is super important, as you can assign dates to each task and who's doing what. You can also jot down the risks that might go wrong while in the project, and what to do if those risks happen or if anything does go wrong, and you can also prepare for the worst. So moving on to a more agile workflow, we have the Scrum and the Kanban board. This is the workflow that I end up using early on in the project. I'll explain why later on. But pretty much to sum it all up, it's where you put all your tasks in a stack or a heap or whatever you want to call it. You then organize them things into importance and to obviously least important. You can note down on these tasks how hard they are or how easy they are to implement. And obviously the stack/heap will get changed over the course of the project. So moving on to the sprint backlog, this is where you would move the tasks over from the heap into this backlog, and then each team can pick out what they want to do and move it into the sprint. The sprint is a burst of work over 2 to 4 weeks depending on how long you've got to do the project, and it's what the team will be specifically focusing on for that week. At the end of each sprint, you then have a little team meeting to see what's been done. If not, you move the task back to the start and then you repeat the sprint. This works very well with the Kanban board, and I'll be explaining what software I'll be using. So yeah, that was just a quick summary of all the things we learned at the beginning of the module. So next up was assigning everyone a team. The goal was to get everyone on a team by the first day of my game even being chosen. First of all, I thought, let's get a Discord set up. Let's do that first of all, because everyone's familiar with Discord in the class. Everyone pretty much uses it on a daily basis. So yeah, first plan of action was to get one of them set up. This would just lay a good foundation for the coming weeks. So I came up with 6 different teams with my teacher. These included UI, mini games, audio, technical art, VR and gameplay overview. So starting with the UI team. Basically their job was to make sure the user interface and the user experience was catered to the VR experience. They had to try and make a workaround on not having any UI actually on the screen, as that can cause motion sickness with VR. So we had to come around with different ideas and try and figure out how we can implement the UI into the actual game itself. This team worked very closely with the minigame team, as we had to figure out a way to implement useful UI while playing the minigames. So that brings us quite nicely over to the minigame team. The goal for each person on the minigame team was to dedicate a minigame to each person, and they'll be working closely with every other team to try and get all the assets and all the things they need for their minigame. So moving over to the technical art team, this team's job was to create assets for all the minigames and actually create the house itself, and all around trying to make the game look pretty and nice. So next up is the audio team. Their job was to find scary audio effects and come up with different voice lines for the phones that you would pick up around the map.
Today has been just like any other. Alone, barely enough to gain, enough to live on.
And just, yeah, generally trying to make the eeriness and the sound of the game. Next we have the VR team. Now the VR team job was to just set up all the VR software, get it all working ready for development. Any issues we had with the VR, it was their job to try and fix them, and also set up the main starter project for getting the movement sorted with the VR, all the pickup mechanics and all that sort of stuff, just to get us a starting point for the project. And last but not least, we have the gameplay overview. These were the guys that were helping me out with organizing the teams and just all around trying to organize the project. This team worked very closely with GitHub. Their job was pretty much to organize the GitHub and make sure nothing went wrong. But as you'll soon find out, a lot does go wrong, but they did a great job considering. So now that we have all the team titles, we then went back to the Discord and allowed people to choose what team they wanted to go on. I then went around the room and double checked if everyone was happy with their decision to make sure that, you know, they were happy going forward with what they were going to make and, you know, what that team involved. Once everyone was happy, I then made a Trello board, which is going to be quite important going forward now. I mean, it does get abandoned halfway through, but we'll explain that later on. And I pretty much just finalized all the teams on the Trello board to make sure everyone could refer back to it if they needed to, if they somehow forgot what team they were on. So yeah, now that all the teams are done, now it's all about getting all the tasks down, everything that needs to be done, and kind of looking over the whole project and seeing how long this is really going to take. So my plan going forward was to use the software called Trello. It's an online Kanban board style software that is great for team management and organization. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be using the Scrum tactic for the start of the project. And Trello works amazing with this type of workflow, as you can make different types of boards and you can turn one into the stack and one into the sprint. My role as project manager was to list out all the tasks that needed to be done in the stack and then move them over to the sprint and double check with everyone to see if they were all happy with what they had to be doing and everyone was clear on the week ahead. The reason I chose the Scrum tactic was because I thought it would be the one that got me involved the most in the group, as I would be checking in each week to see how the team are getting on. And I just like the idea of picking stuff out the stack and talking with the team to see what needed to be done that week. So finally, a big part of the project is the GitHub. GitHub is where our main project is going to be living, and all the different branches for each team so they can work on their own separate branch, and then eventually at the end of the project merge all the branches into main, and there we go, there's our main project done. So I think that brings me on quite nicely now to what actually happened within the 9 weeks. I'll be going over all the team meetings, all the drama that went down, all the issues we faced and how we overcome them. So, week 1. After we had all the software set up, as I mentioned previously, like the Discord and the Trello, we then had a team meeting. The team meetings involved each team coming up separately and asking me questions about the game, any concerns that they had, and then I would try and answer their questions as best as I could and explain what their job was going forward. After these team meetings, we discovered a lot of flaws in my idea, and the game ended up changing a drastic amount. Some of these changes included literally flipping the game on its head. Instead of now being quiet, you now have to make as much noise as possible to keep the monster away. A lot of people were confused with this idea to begin with, but it slowly grew on everybody as it seemed to be a more interactive VR experience, being able to smash stuff and make as much noise as possible. The reasoning for this change was the fact that people would experience motion sickness while in VR. The original idea for the game was to move slowly with the joystick or move fast to get away from the monster with the joystick. But we realized if you're going to be teleporting, then you're not going to be making any noise whatsoever because you're just going to be teleporting from one spot to another. So yeah, the workaround for this was to flip the game on its head and be able to pick up things on the side and smash them on the ground or on the wall to make noise. We then had to come up with an idea to be able to display how much sound you're actually making. So we had these little noise meters placed on the side or on top of cabinets that the player could clearly see and see how much noise they are making. If you're not making enough noise, then the monster will catch up to you and then end up losing the game. So because everyone wasn't there in that Pacific meeting with that one team that came up with this new idea and the new idea to change the game, we then had to update the design document, and then I had to push it out to everyone and say, look, the game has changed drastically here. Make sure you read the design document so you're completely clear on what's changed within the game. And obviously there's going to be people that aren't going to read this, and it ended up people were still confused later on, like week 7, week 8, on what the game actually is. But it was all there on the design document, but maybe it was my fault that I didn't push it out as much, and I could have promoted this design document a little bit. We ended up changing the game even more later on down the line, as we had to cut the scope nearer to submission, as we clearly weren't going to end up adding as much features in as we planned originally. So moving on to week 2. Originally we were going to have 4 people on the minigame team, but as someone wasn't in class, we then had to cut the minigame team down to 3. At this point we were still planning on having 4 minigames eventually when this person would eventually turn up, but he turned up quite late through the project, and we didn't make as much progress on the minigames as we wanted to. Also in week 2 was the first sprint. This is where I set up the plan for the next week of progress and the next lot of work that I was planning on getting done. My goal for this week was to make sure that everyone was on the Trello and everyone could see the sprint and everyone was clear on what they had to do. So I pretty much walked around the class and made sure everyone was invited to the Trello. Everyone could definitely see it, so there was no excuses that no one could not see the Trello or they didn't know what they were doing. Moving on to week 3, this was our first experience of actually setting up a VR project. I chose Unreal Engine as it's a very powerful engine and it can run VR quite smoothly and very well. The original plan was to use the Oculus headset, but as we soon discovered, this wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. The computers at uni had this thing where we couldn't install the Oculus software, which would allow us to use the Oculus within Unreal Engine. Instead, we had to use the H2 Vive. I think I got the name of that headset right, but yeah, we couldn't use what we wanted to use originally. I wouldn't say this slowed down the progress. I would just say that it caused some issues when we were moving over to Oculus when we could eventually get it working. So now that we had the template open and we could move around in VR in the default VR template on Unreal Engine, the next goal was to get the house model that one of the Eager Beavers, Hayden, on the technical art team made in the first day of actually starting the project. We wanted to merge the model of the house with the VR template, and this went completely wrong. It completely messed up. It ended up deleting the house model, and Hayden had to make this house about, I would say, 5 times. Yeah, it didn't go very well. As we were not very experienced with the GitHub, it kind of went wrong a lot of times. So moving on to week 5, this is where I put the coding standards on the Trello to make sure everyone's code was exactly the same moving forward. So each week we did code reviews with the team leaders to see if their team's code was keeping up with the coding standards. We wanted to make sure that everyone's blueprint names were named consistent across the whole project, and everyone's variable names were in camel case, and just pretty much trying to keep the code consistent across the project. This was so if we were sharing code about, or we were trying to find a blueprint, people could easily find them and people could easily understand the code. I think this is super important when working in a big group, so no one gets confused and everyone's on the same page. And yet again, on week 5, the GitHub messed up. It broke the VR movement and the house once again. So we decided to scrap the GitHub just for now and get the house and the VR movement onto a USB drive. just so we had the very basics there on that drive just in case anything bad happened. So with week 6 we made a brand new repository which was suggested by the teacher. This was some feedback that he gave us and said like, listen, you need to get this demo done because it's like week 6 now. We know we don't have much time left of teaching, so the feedback was just to try and get the house and the VR template on one project, which we did manually, and put it on main on a brand new repository. We then created a branch for each team and put a project of the main on each branch, so each team had that version of that project on each branch, if that makes sense. So pretty much by week 6 now we have a project with the house and the movement in, which is just a monumental moment. I got so excited about this. We finally had something to show for all that pain and all that GitHub trauma that we went through. So yeah, it was great to finally have a demo. And then come to week 7, we had a little bit of a movement bug and we had to try and fix that, but luckily it was only on the one branch and we had a working movement elsewhere, which was why it was so good. We had multiple projects on different branches now, so if we messed up on one branch we always had a backup. And yeah, pretty much by week 7 now we had pickable items, so we could pick up plates and we could throw them, and we also had the sound meters and stuff on the walls. We had a pretty good project going, but unfortunately after this week we had no more teaching sessions, which was quite unfortunate. Week 8 though, people did come into uni, and I tried to organize people to come into uni either way if there was no teaching sessions. It was just a lot easier to work in class with people actually in person, so I could go around and talk to people. Unfortunately not everyone could make it in, but it was still worth going in for that time, as I could interact with people and see how the game was getting on. And week 8 was when I implemented the final action plan, as we didn't have much time left till submission. We had about, I would say, 5 weeks till we had to actually submit the game, but all of this work now would be online, which is quite unfortunate. So while it was online, we had a lot of issues with testing. This was because not everyone had a VR headset, and the only way they could test if what they've done is working is to get someone with a VR headset, make them live stream their branch and see if it's actually working. This obviously slowed down development a lot because people can't just press play and test it, as it's not just a 3D game or a 2D game. They have to have the VR headset, which is why halfway through the project we actually wanted to decide to switch it to 3D. This was like when we were panicking near the end, and we were like, we need to change the game, not everyone can test. We had our ups and downs, but we ended up sticking with VR in the end. And also Trello at this point had been completely forgotten about. I would say the UI team were the only people still using it and referring back to it. I slowly realized over the course of the project that no one was really using Trello and no one was really looking at it, so I felt like I was just wasting my time with it. So I decided to go for a more agile route. I was looking back at my old notes on after talking to the industry professional and what he was saying, and he was talking about having interaction and like personal interaction with the team over the process and the tools. So instead of using all these softwares and trying to be super organized, it was more of a case of me getting involved and interacting with everyone and seeing how I can organize it that way. Because really by this point everyone really knows what they've got to do. It's just a case of trying to order it in importance and what needs to be done before the deadline. And I actually found it better like working on a project now that had a demo going, instead of having all this structured documentation. We could debug and test what's going on with the game and just go and work from there, sort of thing. I think I preferred responding to the change that was going on in the game over having a structured plan. I found this worked a lot better near the end of the project, but I don't think I would have changed the way I approached the start of the project, as I felt like we needed that structure to begin with so everyone was clear on what to do. But then as the project moved forward, I found it was better to be more agile and sort of respond to change as it was happening. So I'm just going to be interrupting myself here for this week's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Just kidding, I wish. Pretty much I'm just going to be playing the final gameplay in the background just to display what the game ended up looking like when we submitted it. In the last week or so, I tried to add other things and trying to fix the game up, like such as the lighting, adding more candles everywhere, trying to add more plates everywhere, trying to fix the game all up together, but we ended up running out of time, and this is what the game ended up looking like. We have some good gameplay of the mini game. This is basically the whole game because only one mini game ended up actually getting fully completed. And then the person recording this gameplay, Hayden, ended up walking around the house and showing what it ended up looking like. So as I'm waffling, in the background is going to be playing the final gameplay. And yeah, so back to old me. And I think at the beginning I was always afraid to change the plan, and I was always afraid of this change. But I feel like as I progressed, I realized that this is all part of making a game, and it's going to change. Things are going to go wrong, and things like this are going to happen. If I could do this experience all over again, I would definitely try and have a more structured roadmap at the very beginning of the project, and then allow the team to make changes to that over time, and just have something there to update, and then have a separate thing for the actual technical tasks that need to be done, just so we can refer back to it. And I would prefer to be in person all the time so I can interact with people and have these personal interactions about the game. I think the project started to go downhill was when we went online. Not as much was getting done, and I feel like not as many people were enthusiastic about it. You really do underestimate the power of like human interaction and how much you can actually get done in person over just messaging online. We had some super funny moments while working together as well in person. From testing on the VR headset, people messing about, it's all in good fun. It was just a super fun experience. Also, people worked incredibly hard throughout the whole thing. No one took any breaks. No one played any games when they weren't meant to be playing games. Everyone was super hard working. But yeah, all jokes aside, if I could do it all over again, I would in a heartbeat. It has been absolutely amazing, and I just want to say thank you to everyone on the team. Thank you to my teachers. It's been absolutely amazing. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's always been a dream of mine to run a game studio and be the lead of something. I never thought I would have the guts to do it. I even catered my pitch around just so it wouldn't get chosen. I chose something really ambitious, but it ended up hitting me on the head and coming straight back at me. So yeah, this video was a pretty long one, so if you stuck to the end, thank you very much. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and make sure to like the video as well. Some of my other videos will be popping up on screen now, and I hope you enjoyed, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.